In this video, we are going to explore the different interactive learning activities that mAuthor provides. We will also learn how to embed some of these activities in a lesson. So let's start a whole new lesson. I will click on Create New Lesson. For the title, it can be Activities Sample. And then you can click on the Create button at the bottom. We can access all of the interactive learning activities by going to a module and then click on Add Module. And from this Add Module window, you can go to the Activities tab. And these are all of the different activities that mAuthor provides. However, instead of adding one by one and exploring how they work, it is better if we go to the Help section. In the Help section, mAuthor provides samples of each of these activities. So we can close this Add Module window and then go to Help and go to Modules Examples. So I will right-click and open it in a new window, in a new tab. And we can see all of the different samples for the activities and any other components, any other modules. So as we can see over here in this help page, we have the different components or different modules for activities, math activities, and advanced math features, games, media, and so on. So it is helpful to take a look to the samples to explore what they do, to have a better idea or understanding how they work and which ones we can use depending on the content that we are going to teach. So let's suppose that we want to know how this text identification activity works. So we can just click on it. We right click and open it in a new tab. So I can come back to this list of activities later on. And you can see that for each of those activities, we are going to have a few samples of how that activity works. So in this case, this is the text identification. We can notice that we can click on one of the options, one of the answers, and then we get some text over here, and then if we click on the other one, we also have some text. We can go to the next page, and then we can see if we click on this select, this text is selected, and if we click deselect, is unselected. So at least we are getting some ideas of how this activity could work. Over here we have three potential answers. So if I can click on one of them, we notice that the one I click on is highlighted. And then if I click on the second one, we notice that the first one is deselected. And the second one is highlighted. And if I click on the third one is highlighted. And if you want to explore how this example was created, you can go back to the list of activities and you can copy that lesson to your My Lessons section so you can see how it was created. And that might give you a better idea of how the activity works. So let us do that. I will copy the text identification activity. I will copy the text identification as sample to my lessons. So I will just click on copy to my lessons. And we can see now the copy of that lesson. This is the one that I was creating. This is in my first tab. And now we have this new, this is a copy of the text identification sample. So we can open it by clicking on the edit icon. And this is again just to give us a better idea of how the text identification activity works. So as you can see over here, this is the actual lesson. So you can see the different pages that this lesson has. We can see over here the text identification module or component. And based on the sample in the second page over here, you can see that the feedback is changing depending on the element, on the component that you are clicking on. So we can see how they are doing that. So we can go back to the edit mode, and then this is the part that is changing. And over here in the property, you can notice that it's just a text, it's plain text. So that means that something is happening when the user, the learner, is clicking, is selecting this any of these text identification modules. So you click on one of them and go to unselected, and then click on these three dots over here. You can see that something is happening over here. This is the ID of this text that is being displayed over here. So this is the ID, it's called a text feedback. And then it has a dot, and then it has set text. And within parentheses and within double quotes, we have whatever we want to display. So I can change this message like this, and then I can save it. And then I will click on the other one, and then I will go to unselected. Before doing that, just look the ID of this element over here. The ID is text feedback. So when I click on this module, and then when I click on unselected, I am accessing, I am referencing this element using the ID. So the ID again is text feedback, and then we have set text, and in within double quotes and within parentheses we have the text, the feedback that we want to display. Good evening. So I have changed the text. I will save it. Now if I preview it, if I click on the first one, it's going to say good morning in this case, and when I click on the second one, it's going to say good evening. So you can have some ideas of how to potentially use this activity. So let us go back to our lesson, the one that we were trying to build, and let's add that activity, the text identification, now that we have a little bit better idea of how it works. So I will go to module and then click on add module. From the activities tab, I will click on text identification. It's this one over here. And this is all we get. You can make it longer or shorter. So you can modify it, and you can move it around as well. And over here you can see the ID. The ID that it was given is a text identification 1. The ID might be too long, so it might be helpful if we shorten it up so we can refer back to it with a shorter ID. So instead of text identification 1, I will just call it TI1 for text identification 1. And then if we preview the project right now, after we have added this text identification activity, nothing is really happening. I can just click it, but we are not showing anything yet. So just select it, and then if I click it again, it's unselected. But ideally we should display some feedback, some text when we click on it. So let us do that. I will add some text over here at the bottom. So I will go to module, and then I will add a new module. Under favorites over here, we can have the text, so it's like a shortcut. You don't need to click on the add module. You can directly click on the module that you want to add. So we want to display some text. I will click add text. By default, when you add text, mAuthor is displaying different types of text activities. You can just double click on it and remove everything, and then you can type any text that you want. So this is going to be feedback for button 1. In other words, this is what is going to be displayed when we click on the first button. You can change the size and the font and the color and so on, but let us keep it like that for now. You can just click on save. Now let's pay attention to the ID. The ID is called text1. So you can use whatever you want for the ID. You can keep it like that, or you can give it a different ID. So in my case, I will call it feedback 1. And actually it shouldn't say anything because the text is going to be added automatically when we click on the button. So that was my mistake. We don't need this text over here yet. We can just leave it empty. And when we click on the button, we are going to add the text. So save it. So feedback 1 is empty right now. So you need to click on the button again, and then click on unselected. And over here, you need to specify the text that is going to be displayed on the feedback 1 element. So the ID was feedback 1, and we want to set the text. Remember that set text is the command that we learned from looking at the sample. And then within parentheses and within double quotes, we add the text that we want to display. So I will save it. So it has to be like this: set text with capital T. So it's case sensitive. Click on save. And now we can test it by clicking on preview. And when I click on the button, we can see the text. We can add more buttons. A simple way to add buttons is by clicking on the first one and then click on copy module and then paste module, and then it's going to duplicate it. And it's going to duplicate whatever the other module had. We can give it a different ID. By default, it tries to give the ID of text identification 1, and then the next one is going to be text identification 2, and so on. So again, I will shorten this very long ID to TI2. So every component, every module has to have a different ID, a unique ID. So the first one was TI1, and this is TI2. Now, when we select the second one, we are going to change the feedback, and this is going to be the feedback for button 2. And then we can save it, and then we can preview it. So when we click on the first one, we get feedback for button 1, and when we click on the second one, we get feedback for button 2. All right, another way to get help about each of these different components is by going back to edit, and then you need to click on the component, and then on the properties panel on the top right corner you will see the question mark, and this is going to open the documentation, the help section for this specific element. So you can click on this question mark, and you can see the explanation of each of these properties over here, like text is this property over here, selection is correct, is this one over here. So you can see the description, what they mean and what they do for each of these properties. This is the list of supported commands. So you can use these commands whenever you click on the unselected or unselected. These are the commands you can use. For instance, we can use the deselect command to deselect the other button. So when we click on one of them, we can deselect the other button. So we can do that. So if I will close this help over here. When this button is clicked, the other one should be unselected. The ID for this button is TI2. So when I click on TI1, TI2 has to be deselected. So I can click on this unselected property, and then I will access the other module, the other component. The ID is TI2, and the command is unselect, deselect, like that. So I will apply it, save it, and then test it. I will preview it. So if the second one is selected, and then when I click on the first one, we see now that the second one was unselected. Right now both of them are selected. However, when I click on the first one, the other one gets unselected, and that's because we added that line of code. So we can click on edit again, and we can do the same for the second one. So when the second one is clicked, when the second one is selected, we need to unselect the first one. The ID for the first one is TI1. So I will click on the second one and then click on unselected, and I will access the first one by typing TI1 deselect, like this. So this is going to deselect the first button. Okay, so we can preview it again. So you can see the first one is selected, it's in blue now. When I click on the second one, now the second one is selected, and the first one was back to green, so it's unselected. So now I'm selecting and unselecting the other one, and the feedback is updated accordingly.